Welcome to Adventures in Accessibility, a podcast that explores the far reaches of disability, access, and inclusion, with your host, Dana Barton.
Well, hi there. Thanks for joining us again on Adventures in Accessibility. Today we're talking to Chris Finn. Chris is a power soccer coach. When Chris was 21, a spinal cord injury during a freak accident resulted in quadriplegia and the use of a power chair. Chris grew up loving soccer and thought his days of playing were over, but then he discovered power soccer and helped to develop the National Association and the International Federation of Power Soccer. Then he became the head coach of the U.S. National Power Soccer team. His teams won the 2007 and 2011 Power Chair Football World Cup competitions, and his current club team has won the national championship for 2014 and 2017. In addition, Chris has been honored as a Disability Community Advocate of the Year, as a nominee to be inducted into the National Spinal Cord Injury Association Hall of Fame, and as Comcast News Group's Hometown Hero. Last year, the city of Berkeley named August 11th Chris Finn Day. Chris shares his story through public speaking and his message, which is, "You are able." So welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I, for one, am really excited to learn about power soccer. I didn't know that this adaptive sport existed. So I want to get into that. But first, I want to learn a little bit more about your disability. What can you tell us about that?
My body had a spinal cord injury November 7th, 1992, when I was 21 years old, and it resulted in a cervical fourth and fifth vertebrae pinching of the spinal cord, which caused the paralysis. And what it resulted from was I was out one night. I was in ROTC, and we had our military ball to celebrate becoming a second lieutenant in the Army once we graduated college that year, and went out for pizza and beer afterwards. Had a few beers, went to the pizza place to get some pizza, and I went to the bathroom. I had to go to the bathroom. And as I was standing there going to the bathroom, I felt this wave of tiredness come over me, and almost to the point where my head started bobbing as if wanting to fall asleep. And then after I finished going to the bathroom, I was just in that sleepy kind of state. And I think what happened, and I'm not quite sure, is that maybe I put my hand up on the wall and my head on my hand to support myself or just to rest because I was feeling sleepy. And my guess is that I maybe collapsed head first into the wall, and then thus my head bending back or with the fall somehow landed on the floor, and next thing I knew I was on the floor and couldn't move.
Wow, that's a story. So what happened? Did you wake up in the hospital, or did your friends take you to the hospital? What happened from there?
My friends were waiting for me to get some pizza. And when I didn't come back and and the pizza place wanted them to order, they finally went searching for me and found me in the bathroom. And they thought I was just another drunken guy and maybe passed out or something happened. But then I was having trouble breathing. I couldn't shout or talk very loud because of the level of injury. And so I did my best to communicate to my sister, and she finally realized that something was wrong when my body was limp and I didn't get up. And so they finally took me to the hospital, and that it was probably around 1 or 2 a.m. And and then the doctors saw me and eventually started doing a spinal fusion on me later, kind of late in the morning that morning.
Okay. And so after you had that surgery, is it right that you went into a rehab facility? What was that experience like for you?
I was in ICU for probably about a month and a half on a ventilator and just getting stabilized. And at one point, they the doctors weren't sure I was going to make it. I had some heart problems and some other things, and it was a little touch and go. And they finally, once they got me stabilized, they moved me to another ICU closer. That was in Wisconsin, La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I went to school. And then they moved me back closer to home in Milwaukee, where my parents lived. And then from there, about a month and a half later, after the injury occurred, went into inpatient rehab in Milwaukee.
And what were they trying to accomplish in the inpatient rehab?
Well, the big thing is how to see if we can get any or function back for Chris, and then with what function he does have, how can we strengthen that to help him be independent or functionable out in the community.
And was that successful? Did you get to a level of functionality that you feel like is good? What's your functionality like now?
My level of function, motor wise, with my muscles is about typical for what someone might have with a cervical fourth and fifth vertebrae spinal cord injury. I have strong biceps on the left, fairly weak biceps on the right, and then a little wrist function on the left, no wrist function on the right. And the wrist function is more just about a C6 level type of function, and no triceps or no hand function. That goes a little lower on the chart. For the lower down you go on the spine, the more function you have.
And so when you were in the inpatient rehab facility and they were releasing you, were you automatically introduced to a power chair, or what did that look like?
When I was in ICU, I was first introduced to a chair. Okay. And I didn't really want to accept it at first, because that's not who I thought I was or what I wanted to be. And so that was a little bit difficult for me, just, the doctor saying I would never walk again, because in my mind, I thought, well, I'm just going to be in here for a week and a half. They'll fix me up and I'll get out of here.
Yeah, the mindset of a 21-year-old, right?
Yeah, I didn't really realize the extent of my injury the first week and a half I was in the hospital, because of all the just sedation that was happening and things. And when I finally got to inpatient rehab and really got into my first power chair, it in a way it was liberating, because I had been being pushed around in a manual chair for the last 2.5 months or so, and now I was able to actually go somewhere where I wanted to go, or do anything I wanted to do as far as getting somewhere, and do that somewhat independently.
So how did that use of power chair, I guess, translate into your involvement with Power Soccer? I know you were a soccer player as a youth, and you were really into playing. How did you find out about Power Soccer, and how did that fit into your lifestyle?
For years after my injury, I'd looked around in Milwaukee for a sport for people who use power chairs. And there really wasn't much that you could truly be competitive at. And that was a little bit difficult for me, because I had been such a sports-minded guy growing up and playing soccer all through high school, and dreaming I wanted to be the next Pele and win a World Cup, as an 8-year-old, and here I was not able to do really any kind of sports. Though the one sport I kind of made a modification that I could do at the time was play darts, like bar darts.
Yeah.
Which was fun, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't that getting that competitive juices going. So about in 2000, 1992, I moved out to California and from Wisconsin and found out about an organization called the Bay Area Outreach and Recreation Program, otherwise known as BORP, B-O-R-P.
Okay.
And they had a sport called power soccer, and it was specifically for people who use power wheelchairs. And I said to myself, I'm there. Soccer, power wheelchairs, what can get better?
You're all in.
I'm all in. The synchronicity was amazing.
Okay. So tell us, because again, I had no idea about power soccer. So how is it played and where is it played?
It's played in a gymnasium using the boundaries of a basketball court.
Okay.
It's 4-on-4 using a ball that's maybe about twice the size or diameter of a regular outdoor soccer ball. So the power soccer ball is about 13 inches wide, and people attach foot guards, they're called, or metal brackets or foot guards onto the frame of the wheelchair in order to then spin the wheelchair like a pinball flipper to kick the ball or push it, that type of thing. And there's also power chairs out there now that are especially made specifically for the sport that go a little faster, accelerate, or lower to the ground and have a little bit more power to them.
Okay. And so you played within a club system, and there are power soccer teams internationally. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So if someone was interested in finding out where they could watch a power soccer game or get involved in a power soccer team, how would they do that?
The best place to go in the U.S. is the United States Power Soccer Association, and that's, I believe their website is powersoccerusa.net.
Okay, cool. And do you ever get like pushback from gyms that don't want like power chairs on their courts or, aren't understanding about the sport? Does that ever happen?
At times we've gotten a little pushback where maybe some chairs maybe leave some marks on the floor. Maybe they're from certain type of wheels. But for the most part, gyms are pretty accommodating and welcoming to being willing to have the sport come because it's new to most people. It's exciting and it's accommodating.
Okay. Are there other adaptive sports for power chair users?
There's one other sport for people who use power chairs that I know of, and that's power hockey.
Oh, I like that. You're speaking my language now. All right, cool. What about other adaptive equipment that's used? Do the foot guards just fit onto the wheelchair? Any wheelchair? What's that like?
When people usually start out playing the sport, they come in their everyday chair. So teams usually do their best to get a plastic foot guard. Sometimes we even use milk crates and a bungee cord just to strap them on for something to be able to get that experience of being able to push or play with the ball.
Okay.
Yeah, and once someone starts to say, I think this is something I'm into, then maybe they'll look at purchasing a metal foot guard so that the ball reacts a little bit more. Some people make their own metal foot guards. And I started out with, there's a guy in San Jose, Robert Book, who really started introducing the metal foot guard and making them out of conduit. And we basically bent our own conduit and then welded the pieces together to make a foot guard.
Wow. That's innovative. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what do you think the future of power soccer looks like?
Well, the future of power soccer is right now they're doing their best to get the sport into the Paralympics.
Okay.
And they've struggled with that a little bit for my guess what might be a few different reasons. But right now they do have internationally, they have their own World Cup competition every 4 years, and they model their international association even down to the name, which is FIPFA, P for power chair, similar to FIFA for the outdoor.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and modeled the structure of competitions regionally and internationally similar to the outdoor game, and now it's just looking to get that inclusion into the Paralympics, which has been a little bit of a barrier.
Okay. Why is that? Why is there a barrier?
I couldn't say for sure because the Paralympic Committee has their own thoughts and agenda, but
Sure.
there may be a few reasons, such as there are already a few forms of soccer in the Paralympics.
Okay.
And maybe they don't want another one. Or another reason could be is that they don't have a power wheelchair sport in the Paralympics. And this would be the first one, and maybe they don't know how to create the regulations or classification around it or accept the classification structure that has been developed by the power soccer world. But what's interesting is that the Paralympics have said over the last several years that they want to be more inclusive of people with more severe disabilities. But the sports that they have allowed, new sports that they have allowed to come in to the Paralympic Games, are not exactly sports for people with more severe disabilities.
Oh, that's interesting. We're in Colorado Springs, so the Olympic Committee just changed their name to United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So we will be looking out for power soccer to be an option for para-athletes moving forward. I'm going to keep my eye on that, Chris. But right now I want to shift gears. So it was 1992 when you had your injury. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so the ADA had just been signed into law. Did you know about the ADA, or who told you that you had rights under the law? What did that look like for you?
When I was in inpatient rehab, they mentioned it. They're like, hey, it's great news, if there is great news that comes with having an injury, is that there's a new law that will be able to better assist you in getting what you need and hopefully helping you along in that aspect of life.
Yeah. And what areas did you feel like you needed the support of the ADA, as you moved forward into integrating back into mainstream life? Was it access to facilities? Was it employment? What was most needed for you?
Honestly, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because as someone who's newly injured, I was just doing my best to learn how to feed myself again and to acclimate and be part of the community again and navigate the world again. So I think not until I went back to school after being in rehab and things did I recognize that, I need certain accommodations. And in order to get that, when they're not provided, here's this law, and so things that started popping up, like having buttons to open doors in different places and advocating for that on campus and accessible housing in the residence halls and being able to get that. And then it went into, do I have getting the assistance to get the technology to be able to go to school and function and do the work, like a computer, and talking with the Department of Rehab to coordinate that. And then also looking at jobs and what kind of accommodations I might need there and awareness there. Or it could be as simple as attendant care or transportation. These things all kind of started creeping in.
Yeah. Yeah, you have no idea, right? Until you're faced with that and you need those accommodations. A lot of people just aren't aware of how inaccessible the world can be. So, did you find that as you graduated and you entered the workforce, that employers were aware of the ADA and the need to offer accommodations to you?
Entering the workforce is a tricky question.
Let's talk about it. Let's go there.
Sure. When I came back to school and I changed my degree to recreation therapy, and I thought, well, this is something that I might be able to do and help change some lives in that respect. And then I did an internship doing it actually at the same rehab place where I did my inpatient rehab.
Okay.
Which was kind of cathartic.
Yeah.
But, I learned, what it's like to do a 9-to-5 job. And when, for me, my routine of getting up in the morning is, a good 3 hours. So in order to get to work by, 8:30 or so, with a half-hour drive time, you need to start getting up at least by 5 and then finding the attendant care who's willing to do that and come on a regular basis sometimes was a little bit of a struggle. And then what I discovered is through the internship, I'm like thinking, how much does a recreation therapist make?
Right. I've been there.
Yeah, it's not that much money.
Right.
Dare I say, like $25,000 a year.
Right.
And I thought to myself, the benefits I'm on give me that or more, coupled with, not really cash, but other benefits. And I'm like, here I am wanting to really stress myself out by getting up so early and then going to bed early enough so I get enough sleep and then go and spend my day, albeit doing great things, but then not being able to live any kind of other life because of the time it takes to get up and go to bed and everything else in between. So that was an interesting challenge. And I'm like, let me see if I can find a job or a vocation that would be a little bit more suitable. And so I went to school counseling and got a master's in school counseling, but still it made more money. But
Did you work as a school counselor?
I went through the process and did an internship and whatnot. But then I came out and no one would hire me.
Why?
That's a great question. No one would. I didn't find out. I was probably submitted over close to 100 applications for not only school counseling jobs, but just other counseling jobs in general. Because by the time I applied to all the schools, I needed more places to apply. And yeah, no one. I got one interview, and yeah, it didn't work out. And some of the applications were interesting for some of the schools where they asked actually if you had a physical disability.
No, did they really?
Yeah,
Oh,
they did.
gosh.
They were that kind of dated or behind the times still.
Yeah.
And that was around early 2000s. And so I had to point that out to a few places.
Yeah, you can't ask this. Oh my. And did anyone ask, like, can you perform this job with accommodation, or was it just, do you have a physical disability?
That was never a question.
Yeah.
Can you do this job with an accommodation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't recall if the one interview I did have mentioned that or not regarding applying for counseling jobs. It just wasn't, it was disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, it is disappointing. Did you, when you would go to these employers and say, like, dude, you can't ask me this, what was their response? Were people aware, or were they like, whatever, we're going to ask you what we want to ask you, and that's the end of it? What was that like?
I think it was more like, oh, we didn't realize that, and we'll take a look at it.
And then still you weren't engaged in the interview process or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's a shame. Do you think things have changed? Like from when you were going through this process early 2000s to where we are today in 2019, have there, from who you talk to and maybe other experiences that you've had, do you think employers are making more accommodations for people with disabilities and they're more open to that? Or do you think it's still the same?
I think it's a mixed bag. And I will say, back when I was searching for jobs, I was hired on a part-time basis with Community Resources for Independent Living, which is a Center for Independent Living in Hayward, and doing a few things because I had been volunteering there, and but it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And then I came across BORP, and after I started playing power soccer with BORP, 3 months later, the coach said, "Hey, do you want a job coaching the program?"
Yes, I do. Right?
Yeah, and he said, he's like, "You look like you know what you're doing more than I do." So
Well, that's cool.
yeah, so a few months after I even started playing, I'm coaching 2 teams, and I said, oh, as long as I can still play for for a little while, and kept playing with one team, but it's just a part-time, few hours a week job, but it was something, and so that became my focus. But as far as employers these days, I was just at an event at Community Resources for Independent Living, and one of the biggest things that I heard from some of the consumers there were, "Hey, do you know anywhere where I can get a job? These are my skills."
Mm-hmm.
Because whether maybe they have trouble communicating a little bit, or maybe there's a little something cognitive going on, or just something, but they're looking for jobs that would suit their skills or be in their area of ability, but yet no one will either give them the time that they need to just get into the place of work and show what they can do, or people just don't want to take the time to get to know them and learn how to accommodate. And that's I think that's one of the biggest frustrations. You see some people with a lot of degree and some knowledge, but they just don't get hired.
Yeah. Do you think that's I know we do some work here at the ADA Center on implicit bias. Do you think, bias plays into it, and how have you seen that play out in your life?
I think it all depends on the people you're dealing with. I think just as a society in general, there has been a bias over the years, and I think it has changed some, where sometimes people with disabilities are looked at as, hey, they're not able to do something, so we'll just maybe do it for them, or not go to them as a resource for being able to do something.
Yeah.
And I think overall, I think it's gotten better over the years, but it's still out there.
Yeah. So you now are working on this campaign called You Are Able. Tell us what that is, and maybe how do you see what you're doing with You Are Able helping to change people's biases against individuals with disabilities?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think what You Are Able is and little backstory is when I was around 8 years old, my mom called us in for dinner, all us kids, and sat us down and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And when it got to me, I said, I want to be the next Pele, win a World
Right.
Cup.
Yeah. What 8-year-old wouldn't say that, right?
Exactly. Everybody has their dream, and so a lot of it's sometimes sports. And my mom looked at me and said, "Well, okay, if you promise to go to college at some point," and then she looked at me and she's like, "Chris, you are able to do anything you want to do in life."
Right.
It chokes me up every time I say that, because kind of the three pillars of of you are able are hope, believe, and achieve. And just giving someone hope that something is possible is you're giving them a ticket to even think that they'll have some success or something that is possible, so they'll actually maybe start going for it, whether it's they get hope themselves or someone gives them hope. And believe, the more you believe in something and the more that you're into exactly what you want to do and you believe it's possible, and having others believe in you makes you feel that much more powerful and drives you towards that success. And achieving, I put a little parenthesis before achieving, and it's take action to. It's that taking action to achieve. Whether you achieve it or not, it's great if you do, but it's that taking action and that process of going towards that achievement is what's so valuable to actually getting to that goal or dream that you have in mind, because you're moving. You're going in the flow of going towards of what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And if we could instill that in people, because not only people looking at or working with people with disabilities, it's just people in general, because so often times just in schools, people are putting each other down.
Yeah.
And not even just schools, as adults.
Right.
We're constantly competing for this or competing for that, but what if instead said to each other, hey, you are able, give them a little hope, believe in them, and maybe give them a few tips on how they can start taking action to achieve their goal and dream. And I'm not saying give it to them, because the whole idea of that taking action and going for it is kind of goes back to that parable of you give a person a fish, they'll eat for a day. You teach a person to fish, they'll eat for life. So if you give that person a little hope, help them believe in themselves, and then teach them or show them a little bit of a way to take some action and move towards their goal or dream, that's what's going to drive them, not only for that, but for life.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I know that that's what we're trying to do here and through this podcast is, educate people so that they can, they've been taught, how to use the ADA to get done what they need to get done, and so that they can move forward in life and achieve their dreams. So I love that message, Chris. I think it's great. So I have one kind of last question as we wrap up today, and that is, if you could think of one event or one situation that was a real adventure in trying to gain accessibility in your life, what would it be? What was that situation, and how did you handle it?
How much time do we have? Do I have to pick one?
Yeah. Where maybe have you had a frustration, or were you like, I cannot believe that this is not accessible and I'm going to do something about it.
There's one situation that sometimes comes to mind where it was almost dreamlike, where I couldn't believe, did this just happen? And I was competing in a Toastmasters competition in a district final to go to the international competition at the international convention. And they knew I was coming, and they know Chris uses a wheelchair, and even some of the people who are running the competition were from my club, and they forgot to bring a ramp and to get to the stage. And so when I got there and didn't know if there was or wasn't a ramp, and they gathered all the speakers together, they told us, well, we have an option for all the speakers, and that you have the option to either speak from the stage or speak from the floor. And everybody pretty much said, well, I want to speak from the stage, including myself.
Right.
If you can figure out how to get up there,
oh my gosh,
then okay.
So basically you didn't have that option. Everyone else had the option, but you didn't have an option.
Correct. They decided to put that option out there to kind of cover their butts, or give that perceived notion that nothing was their fault, or that people had the option to speak. And then I still said, hey, this isn't fair. I even protested to the chairperson of which there's a protest, somewhat of a protest process. And then the judge went on to tell me that, one, I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. I've heard you speak before, you give your speech, you have a great speech. And then secondly, they said, and the second reason is that I wouldn't worry about it is, hey, you're in a chair. People will like you even more.
Oh, great. I can't believe someone said that to you.
Yeah, and I was speechless. For a speech.
As you were trying to give a speech.
Yeah, and I went out there, and they called my name, and I kind of like motioned like I can't get on the stage, and they're just like, "Oh, come on out, Chris, come on out." And
no,
and I went out on the floor and didn't nearly have as much space. Maybe the people couldn't see me as well because I wasn't up on the stage. And I thought to myself, what do I do? And when I look back, what I probably could have done, and maybe what would have been better to do, is just change my speech to talk about the irony of speaking from the floor and talking about what just happened. But I didn't. I said, I just gave the speech, and I probably got the biggest applause of all the speakers. And then what was interesting is, after all the speeches were done, one of the other competitors, when they said, when I was kind of arguing, saying that I wanted to speak from the stage and not from the floor, everybody else just kind of dispersed. Like no one kind of backed me up or said anything. I even said, why doesn't everybody speak from the floor? Which, according to the rules, everybody's supposed to speak from the same platform. And they said, well, the chair people said, well, we don't want to admonish or hurt anybody else because they've worked just as hard to speak from the stage. And this other girl has a disability, Tourette's, and we don't want, and we don't want to give her, take away her chance to speak from the stage. And I just thought to myself, wow. But then after the competition, then one of the other speakers said, you know, they interview the speakers all together afterwards as the judges are tallying the votes. And they said, hey, we'll come down to the floor with you for the interviews. And like,
wow.
oh, we don't want you to be separate now. So now that the competition is all done,
We'll come to you.
Yeah, we'll come to you on the floor.
So did you do anything, or do you know if anything has changed within the Toastmasters organization so that that doesn't happen to someone else?
Well, I complained, I guess. I don't know if complain is the right word, but...
you used the law. That's what I like to say.
Yeah, I used the law and pointed out how it was discrimination and for these reasons, and said, this is... I ended up not even placing in the contest, which some people were a little bit surprised, but that is what it is. And but I submitted that and said, I lost out on being able to go to the international competition in Malaysia, and missed out on this. There should be more education. There should be some rule changes as far as how things are done. And if I added up a monetary thing, it would be like tens of thousands of dollars. And they came back and they wanted to settle, and they put in the settlement agreement, they said, oh, and if you tell the story or talk about this, you'll be fined, $5,000 every time. And I thought to myself, there's no way I can sign this.
Yeah.
Because
here you are talking about it.
Yeah, because here is a teachable moment where you have people who are your friends, people who are really in general and overall, I'll say Toastmasters is a great organization and extremely supportive and wanting people to do their best and be their best and become their best. They're great, and I'll recommend anybody to go who wants to speak to go give them a shot. But here you have people who are your friends and your colleagues, going so far as to laugh at you for saying, hey, you want to get up on the stage, but I'm not going to lift you. There's no way. Or say those kind of comments to you, and then want to squash the story, which is ironic because here Toastmasters is about speaking your story and being a leader, but they wanted to take that away.
Yeah.
So I didn't sign it and just moved on, and now it's for me it's a teaching tool. Like even the people closest to you and the people you interact with, there's a potential even that they support you and they encourage you, and for the most part really provide the accommodations you need. But there's times where some people just aren't thinking, or don't know what to say or how to say it, and are supportive of the majority and not the minority. And how do we change that and do that? And so I think it's an important thing to let people know that it's important to advocate for yourself, put yourself out there, and to be able to speak up and tell your story so that other people who come after you don't experience those same type of things, and hopefully along the way be able to change systems and thoughts and feelings around those things.
Yeah. Well, we are certainly really hopeful that this is a platform for people like you to share their story and to get more attention towards the needs the need for accessibility for people with disabilities. And I'm just so glad that you took the time today, Chris, to chat with us. Tell us, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is probably through my website, which is best way to get in touch with me is chrisfinn.com.
chrisfinn.com, and we'll put that in the show notes as well. Well, that wraps up our time today. Chris, thanks so much for spending time with us, and best of luck to you.
Thanks so much for having me, and good luck to what you're doing. It's great stuff.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Adventures in Accessibility. Tune in next time for another dive into the unknown.
Adventures in Accessibility is hosted by Dana Barton, produced by Emily Schumann, and Mike Shea is our sound engineer. This podcast is a project of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center and is funded under a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Grant number 90DP0094-01-00. This production is intended solely for entertainment and informal guidance and should not be considered legal advice. The opinions expressed by guests are not necessarily held or endorsed by the Rocky Mountain ADA Center.